Come on into the ditch. I'm your resident ditch witch, Tara Tyne, and we're about to get witchy, whether you like it or not. This evening, our journey into the ditch is taking us a tiny bit further afield than we're used to going, and we're going to talk about magic in ancient Egypt. Our tour guide for the evening is going to be filmmaker and Egyptologist Curtis Ryan Woodside. Welcome, Curtis. It's fantastic to have you.
Hi, Tara. It's so nice to be on and nice to meet you finally.
Curtis, for those of you who don't know, is originally from South Africa, but has recently made the move to Tuscany to be with his fiance Filippo, and he's been vlogging it on his YouTube channel, and it's giving me life. I won't lie. How are you finding it now in Tuscany, Curtis?
I'm loving it. I just filmed a vlog at a pizzeria. And yeah, it's such a different life here compared to South Africa. I feel like everything's a bit more relaxed. Yeah, and it's going really well. But my vlogs, I'm nowhere near as relaxed on camera as you. I've watched many of your vlogs, so.
Well, I think you're fantastic. I think you and Filippo driving around in the car and just doing errands and messages is fantastic. It's relaxing. I feel like I'm talking with two old friends. I think yous are great. I could just watch you drive around the town all day long.
Well, thank you. We we don't really film every part of our lives. Like, I'm not one of those vloggers who walk around with the camera all the time. Mm-hmm. And also because the world is still kind of in lockdown here. The only time I film something is when something interesting happens. It's like when we go out.
Yes.
So, yeah.
That's it. Well, that's life in lockdown, isn't it? You know.
Yeah. I mean, it's life's not that interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's a challenge for a filmmaker too, I suppose, to make films when there's very little happening.
Yeah. It's very difficult to come up with new ideas and new things because we've had to evolve, don't you feel, with the lockdown?
Absolutely. We've had to reevaluate everything and completely shift the way we do things totally.
Like, I never did Zoom meetings. I am still learning how to do Zoom.
Yeah, same. So. Thanks, Dave. Yeah. Well, look, it's great to talk to, another creative person too, somebody who is on YouTube and is sort of being experimental in the things they do the same way I am. But take us back. I mean, Egyptology, Curtis, how did you get into that? What brought you down that path?
So the Egyptology thing, I've always been interested in ancient Egypt since I was like 6 years old, I would say. The movie The Mummy, the 1999 one, did you watch that?
Yes, I did recently, actually. I thought it was the first time I had ever seen it. I thought I better give this a go now, just in case Curtis says it.
Well, that is what got me interested. I just fell in love with like the beauty and the art and just the sort of the history. Even though that film is complete fiction, it still sparked my interest.
It's visually beautiful as well.
Yeah. And the thing is, maybe something got stuck in my head because we were on a bus going to visit my grandparents from South Africa to Zimbabwe. And the bus arrived before the movie finished.
Yeah.
So I never saw the end. So I've made it like my life mission to see the end. So I've seen the end about 5 million times now.
Just the end, skipping straight to the end, is it?
Actually, it's like the intro and the end. The middle stuff, you can talk to me and do whatever. But the intro, those first 5 minutes, where it's, performing trying to bring Ankh-Senamun back from the dead and all of that. That whole intro I love because that's ancient Egypt that they're showing.
Yes.
Even though it's completely wrong.
Yes. I saw, actually, I don't know if you saw Rachel Maxey, another YouTuber that I just love, did a sort of debunking the mummy video with another Egyptologist whose name I cannot think
Yes.
of right now, but they
Colleen
went sort
Darnell.
of, they went right through it. Yes, yes is right. And I found that brilliant. That was, I actually watched that before I watched The Mummy, which is kind of weird. I know that it's one of Rachel Maxey's favorite movies, so that was
Yeah.
another reason for me to check it out. And I have to say the same thing. My interest kind of flagged a bit in the middle. Dave's here smiling because when we watched it, he absolutely loved it. I says, "Now you know none of it's real, Dave." He says, "Yeah, I know, but you know he loves an action film, so I suppose
Yeah.
that did it for him."
It's one of those really good action adventure movies from the 90s. They don't make them like that anymore.
No, yeah, that's what I was feeling. We watched it on a Saturday evening, which was kind of when I was growing up. They used to play movies like that on the television, and it gave me like this really nostalgic feeling for a movie I'd never even seen. It was just that time and place, sort of sitting down to watch a 90s action movie, like you say. There is something really comforting about it.
It is. But I love that video that Rachel did with Colleen.
Yes.
Colleen's one of my friends, and I have been speaking to her, and we did an interview as well.
I
So
didn't get that
when I
far down
watched,
yet in the archive, Curtis. I'll have to check that out. Amazing.
yeah, we speak all about like vintage things and all of that. So, I'm
Yes.
also very interested in that. So when I saw they did that video, it was so great. So anyone who hasn't seen it, go check out
Yeah.
Vintage Egyptologist Reacts to the Mummy.
I think I can add a card and put a link for it here now above, and in the description as well for anyone that wants to check it out. So,
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I suppose from the interviews with sort of Egyptologists and that I have checked out, is that they might tip on the magic, and it kind of, obviously it always comes into the conversation as part of the wider spectrum of society at the time. But when I went looking for videos that were just specifically about the magic, I couldn't really, there wasn't dozens and dozens of videos jumping out at me on YouTube or anywhere else. So, I mean, was it something when you started really getting into the history of ancient Egypt, did the magic jump out at you immediately, or did it take kind of a longer while to reveal itself to you through what you were learning?
It was actually there from the start, but they might not have referred to it as exactly as magic in the
Yes.
sense, it's not like Harry Potter magic when we
Yes.
with wands and things. It's a little more spiritual. So it's very much involved in the afterlife, how you get to the afterlife. You have to perform spells. We call them spells, but it's more like incantations to ward off certain demons so you can get through into the afterlife. So that's a part that's always there. And of course, very much with the medical side.
Yes.
Magic in ancient Egypt was linked with medicine and the doctors because that's how they explained it. It was some sort of magical thing that happened when you got cured of an illness.
Yes. Which makes sense when you think about it. And it was, as I said, reasons for doing magic in ancient Ireland probably were quite similar. I don't think we were quite as big on the afterlife. Well, it's hard to tell. Well, we've got huge monuments sort of that are directed to the east and the west, but there was nobody you had to, or that we know of, you didn't really have to pacify anyone to get there. It was more about kind of remembering people and that sort of thing. And medical was huge. The amount of a lot of healings, different ways to heal different illnesses, and connected maybe with different deities or spirits. Or, can you introduce us maybe to some of the main characters who you'd be coming across? Like, who were people appealing to for these different, for sickness, for protection, maybe?
Yeah, there's a lot of goddesses who were involved with sort of the magical side. The main goddess that we would say would be like Isis. Mm-hmm. Now, Isis performed many roles, being like the goddess of motherhood, the goddess of protecting the pharaoh. She was the mother of Horus, who was the embodiment of the pharaoh. So Isis was very important, but she was also the goddess of magic. And she if you wanted to be healed from something, if you wanted to get pregnant, there were certain goddesses you could pray to, Isis being one of them. And we sort of see during the later period of Egyptian history, Isis becoming more magical. So we see Isis holding two snakes, which are sort of like wands, and she would use those to perform her magic in that sense. And as you know, Cleopatra saw herself as the earthly embodiment of Isis, which is why Cleopatra took such an interest in science, because science and magic were linked. So Isis would be one of the main goddesses. Another one in ancient Egypt, they called magic Heka. And Heka was also a goddess. So if you wanted to perform a spell, you would ask Heka to help you perform the spell with Isis, for example.
Yes.
So there's a lot of different deities that you would associate with magic. And on the medical side, you would ask, let's say, Imhotep, not Imhotep from the mummy. There's the real Imhotep, who was actually a doctor. And he was deified because he figured out all of these medical practices, which you would ask him to help you perform these medical practices, which for the Egyptians, they saw that as magic.
Yes. It's so interesting you say the link between science and magic. Like it's so interesting how today that they're treated as being exclusive to each other, that you can't have one and the other. And I mean, I'm not a particularly scientific person, but obviously it's good to keep your ear to the ground with new developments and things like that. And to me, it is magic. Maybe it's because I don't fully understand it, but I'm sure a lot of what, both us and ancient peoples would have referred to as magic or seen as magic was maybe just stuff that they didn't fully understand yet, that they couldn't, give you a full blown theory about,
I mean, what would we call the definition of magic? Magic can be many different things, right?
Yes.
If you cook something and it turns out well, you're like, wow, that's magic.
Yes.
If you get healed from something, how do we know that the pill that we took isn't some sort of like a magical ingestion? Think about it in those terms. What exactly is magic? So for the ancient Egyptians, magic, miracles, medicine, whatever, it's all sort of pretty much the same.
That's it. I'm often caught accusing very talented and creative people of witchcraft, just because, not in a bad way. It's a good, it's magic what they're doing. It's when you're creating something from nothing, I find, it's really easy to find the magic when you're a creative person. But as I say, science, the more I learn about it, and healing too. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, how far, like, was magic always connected with healing then? Like, how far back are we seeing evidence of these kinds of incantations or spells being carried out with relation to healing and that kind of thing?
So Heka is one of the oldest Egyptian gods, being associated with magic. And Heka really starts appearing just in the early stages of the Old Kingdom. So we would say about 5,000 years ago, they had this understanding of what Heka was. And Heka was connected to the goddess of the atmosphere, which is Shu. So you get the Heka and Shu, which is a combination of gods, which is the magic that keeps the sky and the earth separated. So even just the elements they would see as something magical. So that's going back 5,000 years ago.
Yes.
And if we look at something more recent, Egypt experienced several plagues, and the goddess that you would pray to when you wanted help during a plague was the lioness goddess Sekhmet. Sekhmet performed many roles, being the goddess of war, but during times of plague, she was the one that you asked to protect you and heal you. And it was this lioness that would magically, heal you from the plague or keep you safe from a plague.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's 5,000 years ago. We're seeing that.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we think about we're going through a plague right now, it's happened many, many times. And there's always a way to get out of it. So if you want to look at, let's say, the vaccine for COVID, you could look at that as a magical cure.
Absolutely. To many people it is.
Yeah.
It's changed their lives again. They're able to communicate with family, see them in person again, and hug people and get back to some kind of normality because they're getting their magic vaccinations.
Yeah. And I mean, as someone who loves magic myself, I grew up being a huge Harry Potter fan. I was always living in a world that was sort of like magical. I used to walk around in the forest and just like to feel connected to something different. So it's interesting how we conceive magic in our brains.
Yeah.
Whether that be literal witchy stuff or something that's more spiritual.
And a bit more subtle as well. I wanted to ask you about, you're talking there about Harry Potter. So in Harry Potter, you're talking wands and things like that. Were we finding what sort of magic implements, say, were people using when they were communicating with the gods, or maybe to direct their power, or what items were closely associated with these practices?
So we get good ones and bad ones. Which ones do you want to hear about first?
All of them. Give us the bad ones first.
Bad ones. Okay, so the bad ones would be to like curse somebody. So there are several ways that you can curse people. We have like potions, for example, where you could mix, and we have papyri of these written, where you could take certain ingredients, mix them together, and they were not nice ingredients. It was like, if a wife was having a problem with her husband and she wanted to get rid of him, take a mouse, drown the mouse in some water, leave the mouse in the water for a few days, and make him drink the water.
Oh, you'd need a palate cleanser after that, boy, wouldn't you?
Well, you wouldn't really. It would be around.
I mean, how long do you have to live with that taste before it'd take you out? Like, you'd be hoping it'd be instantaneous, wouldn't you?
Exactly.
Wow,
So
that is foul. We had our curses. There's no judgment on the curses front here, Curtis. We were good at an owl curse here too, but that one is special. That one is something special.
There's many curses out there. You could curse somebody by making what is in essence a voodoo doll. So you would take wax, like beeswax, and you would sneak around and steal a little bit of somebody's hair, or maybe cut off a little piece of their dress and stick this into the wax and mold it into a figurine of this person. And then you would write on the wax figurine. And while you're writing, you're busy saying these things, I hope this person breaks their leg. I hope whatever. You write this down, and then you would burn the wax. And as it melted, it sent the smoke up to the gods that you were praying to. They would accept that as an offering and then perform the curse that you asked them to perform. Yes. So, it's similar to sort of like, we would say a bit of voodoo.
Yes, the puppets.
Yeah, very similar to that. And then we have also it's like breaking a curse, which is something that I've found that is spread through the Mediterranean, which in ancient Egypt, they would take a clay pot They would write on the pot something that they wanted to get rid of out of their life. So if you were in debt, or if your child was sick or something like that, you would write that on the pot. Then you would take the pot and you would smash it. You would throw it on the ground and smash it, which is a tradition that's spread throughout the Mediterranean. If we look at the Greeks, they still perform this today. People don't understand why Greeks throw plates at weddings.
And it's related to curses, is it?
It's related to curses, because when you throw that plate, you are thinking of something that you want to get rid of out of your life, and you're throwing that on the ground, and that's smashing. And once it's smashed, it's, it's like when you bang your toe on the table, yes, and you swear, you feel better.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. The release.
Same sort of thing. You release it. And that's something that started basically in ancient Egypt and spread throughout the Mediterranean. And there's a tradition that is still continued by many people today. Even like in Western culture, if we get angry, some people get extremely angry and they'll throw a plate across the room, or they break something.
Yes.
It's still that in our psyche, sort of that breaking of a curse.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. Like that sort of release of energy, and in a world so kind of tightly buckled down, that we all kind of go about our daily lives and we try our best to not release big terrifying emotions like anger in a public way. And so every now and then, plates get thrown, because those feelings are still there, whether we're expressing them on a daily basis or not, really, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I threw a cheese grater once, so which was great because it was one of those square ones, and I always had a problem grating the one side. So when it hit the wall, it made a dent on the one side, so it leaned like this, so I could grate really quickly.
Ways to improve a cheese grater, then. Throw it on the wall.
Really throw it.
I love that one with the pots for the breaking curses. It'd be something I'd be into myself. Well, how do you break a curse after you've placed the curse? I don't generally place them myself, because there's just as much work in taking them off. But was there a discrepancy at all, say, between people of different classes and the way that they practice magic? Like, I mean, if you had more money, would you get grander and more sort of elaborate in your rituals?
Yes, so if you were higher class, you could go to a priest or a priestess. Some would see them as an oracle, and you could go to them, and you would obviously have to give an offering or pay them something, and they could speak to the gods and basically grant you your wish or your curse that you want to perform. And like you said, with the magical objects, we do have these similar objects. We have wands. So we have, for example, midwives. They would go to somebody's house when the person was giving birth, when the woman was giving birth. They would make the woman stand on these bricks that had incantations on them. Then they would take an ivory wand. It's shaped sort of like I don't know, this kind of shape. I'm trying to figure out the word. Like a half moon shape.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And it would have incantations on it, and also images of the god Bes. And they would draw a circle around the woman giving birth with the wand while saying the incantation. And that would evoke the god Bes. And Bes would then keep away any demons from the mother while she's giving birth. So that was something that was more for a higher class.
Yes.
And we know that during certain times, during certain rituals, the priests could wear masks, like tie-on masks with patterns and things on them. And this was really to perform certain rituals. Because when you put on the mask, you become somebody else. You're taking on that identity. Yes. So it's connecting yourself more magically. Yeah. So definitely there's a hierarchy of who can do things. You can do things yourself, but remember, a lot of the ancient Egyptians were not literate.
Yes.
So you would have to seek help. So obviously people who could afford the help could get it more easily.
Yes.
And then we get certain things that could only be performed by a high priest or a high priestess, or in some cases, certain rituals could only be performed by the pharaoh.
That's really
Yes.
interesting.
So
Tell us about that.
the temples in ancient Egypt were not, it's not like a church or something that we think of today, where anybody can go inside. You can go into the first courtyard, and that's it. Only the priests are allowed through into the next courtyard and the next one after that. But the ultimate inner sanctuary, which is where the statue of the god would have been housed, that was reserved specifically for the high priest and the pharaoh. So the pharaoh would go to, let's say, Sekhmet to get help with the plague, and he would give an offering to Sekhmet on his own and do certain incantations on his own. Then we get what is called the god's wife, which would be for the god Amun, which the Egyptians saw as the creator of the world, Amun. And he had a wife, so the high priestess of Amun would be known as the god's wife. And she would go into the inner sanctum where the statue of Amun would be, and she would perform rituals, burning incense, saying incantations, which we could see as spells, asking Amun to help protect the country, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so that's sort of how we work around the hierarchy. So really the pharaoh is at the top, so he has access to the books and the scrolls and the knowledge from the priests.
Yes.
And a thing which you could see as sort of like invoking a curse was often the pharaohs on their sandals, on the inner side of the sandals, they would have depictions of their enemies.
So they're walking on them with every step they take.
Every step you take, you are stamping on your enemies, and that's sending signals out. And signals, as you probably know, are very powerful.
Absolutely, especially when you're doing it with every step you take. That is dedication. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, on the throne, at the footstool, they had the enemies where they would put their feet on. So it was constantly trampling on your enemies.
That is amazing. Even for what that would do for your own state of mind. When you get up in the morning, there's your enemy's face under your foot. Like, you're probably having a great day if you're the pharaoh. So
I love that idea.
You're talking there about, the hierarchy. You've got pharaoh, you've got the high priests and the priests. Whereabouts on that hierarchy do the cats actually come into it, Curtis? Please clear this up for us once and for all, will you?
Okay. So, to disappoint many of you, a domestic cat is for the common people. It's a thing that a lot of people will get confused about because of movies like Mummy and things like that. I blame a lot of stuff on the media and movies for the misconception.
And memes as well, or the new version of that.
The new version of the Mummy, please. I haven't even finished watching it. Anyway, where was that?
We were talking about the
cats.
Yes.
Yes.
The misconceptions.
So, the misconception about the cat is for the common people. So the cat goddess is Bastet. And Bastet was more or less the protector of the family, but like the protector of the common people living in the village. You would never really see a pharaoh or a queen making big offerings, big statements to Bastet, to a cat. We do have the city, a city where Bastet was worshipped by the pharaoh, but a small temple, because you see, even a minor god had to sort of be appeased at some point. So Bastet, being very low on the scale there, still had to be appeased by the pharaoh, but she was more worshipped by everyday people. So that's why you would find the statues of Bastet, the cat, inside normal people's houses, tombs. I think the only evidence of a pharaoh being buried with something similar to an offering to Bastet would be the brother of Akhenaten. His pet cat died, and he had her mummified and put in a little sarcophagus with a picture of the cat on. So that's the only time we see a pharaoh with really a domestic cat. Dogs were actually more important in ancient Egypt.
There's one for the dog lovers.
Yes.
They'll be delighted with that.
Cats in ancient Egypt were never given human names. So do you know the ancient Egyptian word for cat?
No.
Just take a guess.
Meow.
That's it.
No.
I'm serious. That is what they call the cat. Meow.
Well, I mean, it's self-evident, sort of. Does what it says on the tin, really, doesn't it?
So that was the cat's name, was Meow. So the cat's Meow. If you had the goddess Bastet in your home, in your little village mud house.
Yes.
So the dogs were given human names. And we see there are several feline gods and goddesses, but those are lions. The domestic cat was, like I said, for common people. And that you can also read into that, because if people had a pet cat, what do cats do? They kill rats, they kill snakes. If someone comes into the house, they'll hiss at them.
Yes.
So there's an example of how Bastet became, for the common people, to protect them from these things that could invade the home.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's always a practical side to everything.
Absolutely. I mean, the way sort of social media have you believe it is they were just sort of blanket worshipped by everybody, and kings and queens just bowing down before the almighty cat, and that's obviously, those memes are created from a cat's point of view. Cats probably love to think that they've been worshipped, but unfortunately it's a wee bit more nuanced than that.
Exactly. The dog was more worshipped higher up, and then of course you get like Anubis, which is a jackal, and there are several depictions of dogs being more higher up. So really, with everyday people, you would see them being depicted in certain tombs with the pet cat underneath the chair, or a pet monkey playing with the cat. So, this idea that the cats are the protectors of the underworld and all of that, that's not really true.
So there you have it, folks. It's an exclusive, if you didn't already know that. Cats were protectors of the home for the poor people, for the people that couldn't afford to have the high priest on their side,
Exactly. We have from certain villages, so let's say, for example, at Deir el-Medina, evidence of people having pet dogs and pet cats, but it's more dogs that we see in the idea of ancient Egypt. Towards the later period, during the Roman times, more offerings were being made to Bastet, which is why, like at Saqqara, we find many votive offerings to Bastet. A friend of mine actually discovered a tomb a few years ago of a high priestess, and her name was Didi Bastet. So she took on the name of Bastet as well.
Wow, that's so interesting.
These temples dedicated to Bastet could be more easily accessed by the common people than, let's say, a temple of Amun, which is the highest point of a temple. So there is a hierarchy on
And
even
are there
the
many
worship of
layers?
God.
Say, are there many strata to the hierarchies of the gods and say access to temples? Like, I mean, you know, have you got kind of the gods of the poor people and the gods of the rich people, or is it, you know, it's probably not that clear cut?
It's not that clear cut at all, but you could see, like the god Amun would solely be worshipped by a pharaoh. Then you get a god like Osiris. Now, Osiris is the god of the dead, and everybody had to sort of get on Osiris's side. So he's a god that thinks about everybody. So, you know, the only example we have of lower grade gods are sort of like Bastet, and then we get minor gods from each village had like their own minor god.
Yes.
So, you know, we have the worship of like Merit Saga. Now, Merit Saga is a cobra goddess, and there's several cobra goddesses throughout ancient Egypt, but Merit Saga is primarily worshipped at Deir el-Medina, which is a town where the builders of the tombs for the pharaohs during the from 18th to the 20th dynasty, where they lived. And they would encounter lots of problems with snakes because this was in a valley in the mountains, the desert mountains. So Merit Saga was more worshipped by the people of Deir el-Medina, but you wouldn't see a pharaoh making much of a big deal out of Merit Saga.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the gods and
by the way, Merit Saga's name.
Sorry?
Sorry, I just wanted to add, Merit Saga's name actually means she who loves silence, because she was a snake that dwelled in the cliffs and in the mountains of where the Valley of the Kings is.
Yes.
So that's sort of where her name comes from, because it's a very quiet, locked off community there.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were going to take me, say now I told you I was going on a trip to Egypt and I wanted to take in magical places which weren't, you know, the Valley of the Pharaohs, like where would you recommend for me to go? Are there other kind of centers?
Yes. So to feel the most connected to ancient Egypt, I would definitely say would be to go to Saqqara, which is where the oldest pyramid in the world is, the step pyramid of Zoser. You get a real sense of the age, but to feel connected to the magic. You know, there's a lot of temples that you could feel the magic at. At Medinet Habu, which is the temple of Ramses III, towards the back, there's like a closed off section, which is where a lot of magic and offerings would have occurred. And there's these little slits in the ceiling, which just allow little streams of light coming through. And that feels very magical to me. But definitely one of the top places, if you're interested in magical spells and rituals and just the feeling, the spiritualism of a place, would be Philae Temple in Aswan on the island. And Philae Temple is dedicated to Isis. And on the walls, you can see a lot of the rituals being performed to Isis. Yeah.
Fabulous.
And Dendera Temple, built by Cleopatra, is also one of the most magical places you could go, because on the ceiling, and I always say this, when you go to Dendera Temple, like take a neck brace with you, because you're not going to be looking at the wall. Your head is going to be looking at the ceiling the entire time. There's so much to see, and it's all zodiac scenes and the rebirth of the sun and the movement of the moon through the night. It's all on the ceiling, which is another connection of Cleopatra being interested in magic science.
Yes. There was one other thing I wanted to ask you about just there. You know, you've mentioned a few different kinds of motifs. I mean, what could you pin down as being something resembling like a creation myth? What did ancient peoples what was the story that they told children to explain where everything came from? Ours is kind of rooted in battle and invasions, mainly invasions to our country. So I think that was kind of, you know, setting the young people up for life so that they knew what to expect in the future. But what would you say is the creation myth? Or, you know, I mean, are there several? There's probably several.
Ooh, in ancient Egypt, there are so many creation myths. It gets so confusing. You actually need to, as an Egyptologist, you just have to pick the one that you like the most.
Well, tell us the one you like the most then, please, Curtis.
So there's one that I like the most, and it's so similar to other creation myths in other religions that we hear about today. So it's the story of Amun-Ra, so the god Amun, who created himself. And then over 6 days, he created the other gods of Egypt. He created land. No, he created the ocean. And then out of the ocean, he created land. And from the land, he created plants. From the plants, he created animals. And then he created people. And on the 7th day, Amun rested.
Of course he did.
Yes. So that's one of the... Yeah, sounds very familiar, doesn't it?
I think I've heard that somewhere before.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So that's one of my favorite ones that I like the most, which really is the reason why Amun is the god of the gods. He is also known as the hidden god. So Amun, his presence is always there, but you can't see him.
He's like the CEO of the company, is he?
Yeah, he's in charge of everybody.
He's got eyes on the ground, but he's too busy to talk to you right now.
And when he's depicted on the walls, Amun, if he's shown as like flesh colored, that means he's physically there. If he's shown as blue, his skin can be blue. That means he's hidden.
Wow. That's so interesting. And are there like noticeable sort of like, is there color symbolism? You know,
yes.
is that a common thing?
Yes. So color symbolizes many different things in ancient Egypt. For example, like I said with Amun, if Amun is blue, that means he's hidden. With the god Osiris, his skin can either be depicted as black or as green, which if it's more blackened, it depends on the time in history. If Osiris is depicted as with black skin, like jet black skin, this would show the mummification form. Because he's the god of the dead, he's the first ever mummy. And when you dry out the body, when you dry out meat, it goes like a charcoaly black color.
Yes.
So that's to connect him with that. But on another side, because he was also the god of vegetation and rebirth, he can be shown as green.
Green is life.
Green is life. So there's a lot of things with the color. And when we think of black being a mourning color for us, you know, when someone dies, we wear black. For the ancient Egyptians, that wasn't the case. Black meant rebirth. And the black is also in the name of Egypt. The ancient name of Egypt was Kemet, which means the black land. And the black land was formed from when the Nile flooded. All the silt and the mud that would come up from the Nile and settle in the fields. Once that dried under the sun, it wasn't a brown color, it was black.
Yes.
Because it had so much mineral, so it was black. And then they called Deseret, which is where we get our word desert from, which is the deserted land, and that would be shown as red, heat,
Yes.
dry. Yeah.
That is
So
so
that's also where you
interesting.
get
And
the
it makes
color.
so much sense when you think about it too. Like we always learned that about Egypt in school, that the floodplains, whilst here, if you've got small villages on either side, it'd be very rare that a river might flood, and when it does, it can be detrimental, and maybe we're not prepared for it. In Egypt, it meant life along the banks of the Nile. It brought life, and it brought, sustenance and livelihood. And
Yeah. And there were festivals, which I'm sure in Ireland, when we think of the Celts and things like that, I'm sure there are also festivals and rituals to take place to ask for the land to be fertile, I'm sure, right?
absolutely, yeah. There would have been nearly a whole genre of customs by farmers, and gods, both sort of national and local, that they would have appealed to. And it was hugely important here, was fertility, and that, although we don't, to the best of my knowledge, we wouldn't have that strong association with green meaning life, because green is kind of everywhere, we're
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
everywhere for us. I suppose the sea was probably more important to us, because things came to us that way, and sometimes bad things came on the sea, but sometimes good things came, and there was abundance there for us. And we would have been big fishers as well, so we were lucky enough to be able to hedge our bets that way. When it came to who you'd pray for abundance for the year to come, you could you could spread it around a bit and kind of
yeah, for sure, for sure. And I like
so
that you said like local and then national gods. That's
yes.
how it worked in Egypt as well.
Yes. I suspect
Yeah.
now, if I was to go and interview, somebody about every ancient culture in the world, that we'd probably find a lot of those kinds of similarities. It's one of the reasons I really wanted to start talking to people about magic from other cultures, because there's lots of us talking about Ireland in Ireland, but for us to have, questions asked from our culture to your culture, to compare and contrast, and what's the same and what was different. And there's actually a little bit more definite of an Irish connection, which I'm going to ask you about in a minute, that we were discussing earlier. But before that, now you've mentioned Amun many times. I'm wondering, would Amun be your favorite magical figure, either real or mythological, or would you have somebody else from ancient Egypt who would have inspired you, or someone you just think is really cool?
Well, if we're talking in terms of the general gods of Egypt, I would say Amun would be my favorite. He's very special for some reason to me. When I see statues of him, he's very like, you should be respectful. That's how I feel around him. Because when you see statues, I hate when I go to a museum and I see people dressed like complete tourists.
Yeah.
Like fanny pack, Hawaii shirt, hat,
Sun visor.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I see people dressed like that, even just going around sites, I want to scream, because these are sacred sites, these are sacred statues, and you should dress correctly, you should respect them. Even if it's not your religion or your culture, you should still have respect for these places and these statues. So Amun would be, as you said, my favorite ancient Egyptian god. If we're thinking about, because a pharaoh could promote himself to being a god. So then I would have to say Ramses II.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've done some great stuff on Ramses II. I have seen some of that.
Thank you. Yeah. He's I know he's depicted often giving himself offerings. I got a book the other day, and in the book was a stela that I'd never seen, and I don't even have to read the site because I can read the hieroglyphs, and I'm like, oh, it's Ramses giving offerings to Ramses,
as Ramses does.
Yeah, but even even pharaohs were deified. We have Ahmose and his mother, Ahmose Nefertari, they were both deified. Ahmose Nefertari was deified because she gave birth to the man that liberated Egypt from the Hyksos. So just because she gave birth to him, she was deified because she gave birth to somebody who did something good.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's very interesting when we start thinking about that. Even Ramses II's mother was deified, and Ramses deified his own mother because when you are in the afterlife, you need to be reborn. And how do you get reborn? You need a mother. So he deified his mother. He deified his own wife as well. So when we think about the deities, it's a very complex thing, because even the common people living in villages, they would worship their ancestors. And the symbol of a star, we see this a lot in the New Kingdom, where we see stars on the ceiling. Each star is symbolizing an ancestor that has passed on. So how similar is that to so many other cultures and religions, where we say you go into the sky and you become a star? I've heard that in many religions.
That's it. And then bringing it back to science, was it Carl Sagan said that we are the stuff that stars are made of? We've all been forged in the stars and the sun, and, you know, ashes to ashes kind of thing, back to the stars when we die.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I didn't mean to go all woo-woo on you guys there, but
here,
yeah.
what do you think we're here for? Where do you think you are, Curtis? This is the Ditch Witch you're talking to.
I spoke to a friend.
Please.
I spoke to a friend yesterday, and she was telling me something that she was thinking about in terms of Egyptology, and she goes, "I know that's a bit woo-woo for you." I'm like, "No, you can get woo-woo. It's okay."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm really glad to have somebody, you know, to guide me through sort of, I don't want to call it woo-woo, I want to call it ancient Egyptian magic, because definitely, you know, we learned bits and pieces. We were aware of hieroglyphs and that in school. We saw pictures of things, and
the hieroglyphs were magical inscriptions as well.
yes, you know, and I looked at it and kind of thought, well, that's obviously it was only when I got older and people were kind of talking about these things as if they were sort of mundane things to be viewed in museums, and, you know, who commissioned this and who ended up with it, and the politics. Obviously magic and politics go hand in hand, but you tend to get a wee bit bogged down in that these days, you know. And I find over on my YouTube channel now, it's about touching that seed of magic that, as you said earlier, lives inside everybody. It's really not that hard to awaken it when people, you know, can make room inside themselves for it. So I think, you know, this is crucial. You know, I wanted to ask you as well, like, how do you think that the magic of ancient Egypt has affected, if it has at all, society there today? I'm sure it has had some kind of influence. Would you say it's a subtle one, or, you know, is it still there to be seen?
It's I'm going to say it's a blatantly obvious influence that ancient Egypt has had on society today, that society does not wish to acknowledge. Shall I put it that way?
Yes.
There's
Maybe another thing we have in common, Curtis, maybe.
Yeah, there's a lot of influences out there from ancient Egyptian religion, ancient Egyptian practices, that people don't realize are ancient Egyptian.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there any of them in particular you'd like to set straight now, or we leave it to people's imaginations and let them do the research for themselves?
I touched on it with one of the Egyptian creation myths, which is very similar. You know, we have depictions of Isis with Horus, with baby Horus, and she's suckling baby Horus. And that depiction of Isis and Horus is 5,000 years old, about 2,500 BC.
before Virgin and Child, as we would know it, Madonna and Child.
Yes. So when we look at it from a historic point of view, that depiction of Isis and Horus, which is repeated 1,000 times, is exactly the same that we see with Mary and Jesus. Yeah. The statues, even the exact positioning on the same side, everything is exactly the same with suckling. It's a very similar iconography. Yes. Isis being the first woman in history to become pregnant spiritually. She became pregnant from Osiris's spirit. So there's a lot of similarities out there. It's just, if you go looking for them, you'll see them. And I think when you see them and you understand how history works and evolves, I think that will help a lot of people to understand their place in the world, to understand how religion has developed, because as we all know, a lot of religion has developed to such a point where it doesn't resemble what it stood for at the beginning.
Yes, it evolves with time and reacts to each different era as it comes along.
Yeah. Yes. So
there's
a lot of symbolism. And if we look at ancient Hindu practices, a friend of mine, she's Hindi, and she bought a new car the other day, and she came over to the house with the car, and she was like, oh my God, I need to bless the car. Okay. So she took a bowl from inside and she put incense in the bowl and she burnt it, and she was blowing the incense all over the car and saying things. And I just thought, like, this is different, but this is similar to ancient Egyptians. They would burn the incense and bless things.
Yes.
Yeah.
And probably a great selection of incense over there in Egypt as well. I'd say I have a particular penchant for good incense now. I like my frankincense and my myrrh and the good stuff.
How do you burn your incense? Because I don't do the sticks.
Yeah, well, this house that I'm in now is fully fitted with smoke alarms, so I don't use the charcoal discs at the minute, but if I'm ever using it outside, it's been a while since I've done that, but I keep the charcoal discs for that. And generally speaking, a bowl with sand in it is the best way to stop the heat from making your bowl explode, but I can't guarantee it won't still happen. Sometimes the woo-woo just happens, Curtis, even when you don't want it to, you know?
Don't get me started. But I have to give you a little hint on burning incense.
Oh, yeah.
Salt. So rock salt. I like burning incense oil. Okay.
Yes.
And I have this beautiful incense burner. It's shaped like Merit Sager with the wings open, and the wings are holding the glass bowl. And then in the coils of the cobra at the bottom is where you would put your candle. And so in the bowl, I take rock salt. I put a heap of rock salt in the bowl, and then I pour a few drops of my incense oil that I'm putting over. So whether that be geranium, sandalwood, frankincense, put the oil drops over the salt. A little bit of water, not too much. Light it. Let the water evaporate, and you keep that salt and you just keep refilling it. The salt will eventually go black, and you just keep refilling it, and you have the best smelling incense that doesn't make too much smoke. It makes a smell. It's amazing.
That is genius.
Yes.
That's exactly what I need to do. Now I have essential oils.
That works.
Yes, actually, I have frankincense and myrrh, so I have my favorite scents in liquid form. That's happening tonight. I'm so impressed with that.
Salt in the oil burner, because when you burn oil in an oil burner, it's like gone. The salt preserves it, and it keeps the smell going for hours.
Yes. Oh, that is absolute genius. I've experimented with radiators in the past, but I didn't get anywhere. I'd refer to as useful. That's a whole new use for an oil burner. Thanks a million.
Send me a picture. Send me a picture. I want to
I
see you try.
absolutely will. Tips for life with Curtis Ryan Woodside. Stay tuned, folks.
We'll call it woo-woo tips.
Yeah, for all your woo-woo needs. Oh, amazing. I think really that the last thing that I have on my list of things that I want to ask you about, the Irish connection. I had been sent a link about this by a friend not too long ago. Hi, Joanne, you might be watching. And I kind of went, oh yeah, I must look more into that now. And I didn't have the afternoon to spend on the research. But you actually brought it up when we come on the phone today. Curtis, tell us about the ancient Egyptian Irish link.
Right. So let me tell you about the ancient Egyptian Irish link.
That was like scary good. That was too good.
Thank you. You know, there are a few accents around that if I start, I just cannot stop.
Okay, if you want to answer this whole question, that accent, I am so here for it.
I'll try.
You have to commit to it now if you're going to do it, Curtis. You have to commit.
All right, I'll commit to it. So basically, there is a myth around that a daughter of the pharaoh Akhenaten arrived in Ireland. She actually left Egypt. I can't continue like this.
I can't believe you made it that far. Oh my god. The accent was jumping around a wee bit, jumping around the country, but I could hear it. It was Belfast. You were way around the block, so you were.
So basically, when Akhenaten died, because he was worshipping one god only, when he died, he had his children, which were his 6 daughters, and I believe one of the daughters may have left Egypt when Akhenaten died to escape persecution from the Amun priests, because they still believed in the ancient, in the religion that Akhenaten formed around Aten, that one of the daughters left Egypt and she went to Ireland. She went all the way up, arrived in Ireland and settled there and had children. And, you know, we don't have concrete evidence on this. It is a myth that has been handed down. But as we know with a lot of myths, sometimes if there's a myth and a story that's been handed down, there's a good reason for it.
Yes, well, you were saying it is a story that has been around for hundreds of years. So at worst, it's folklore, and it's still a story worth being told. That it's something.
And that's just going to end up with all of your redheads in Ireland.
And I did want to talk to you more about but I didn't know maybe if it was getting off the topic a bit like this. The cradle of civilization thing. I feel Egypt in particular is a very important place to go because we have so much record of the ancient culture there. And, there's no 2 ways around it. It's essentially where we all kind of started out from, was that end of the world. And I think learning more about ancient Egyptian culture is taking another step to learning more about where we have all come from. I know we can't all just claim the culture, and we're not looking to do that, and you shouldn't be doing that. But it is important to understand where people in general came from, and what the practices were, and what the beliefs were, and what was important to people then, and how is it different from what's important to us now.
Yeah. Well, I can claim several cultures for myself because I'm such a big mix of cultures. I have a little bit of Irish in me. I have Scottish, I have French, I have Danish. There's a little bit of, Greek, Middle Eastern. So if you trace my family history back, I'm all over the place. But yeah, I think when it comes to the cradle of civilization, like you said, I refer to Egypt as the den of antiquity.
Yes.
So Egypt is very lucky that it was you know, so well preserved in the desert, and it was safe from the elements. If we look
Yes.
at Greece, if we look at Italy, a lot of it was damaged because of earthquakes, rain, things like that. So we don't
Yes.
have that much ancient evidence for it.
Yes.
But if we look at even the ancient Greeks, so many of the ancient Greeks wrote down, like Pythagoras, he went to Egypt and studied in Egypt, and this is in his books. So you can read about Pythagoras going to Egypt. So there was an influence from ancient Egypt on the way Greece was thinking. We have so many people from ancient cultures going to Egypt, learning things.
Yes.
Even Jesus went to Egypt for 7 years. That's where he went to school.
Yeah, I mean, the life of Jesus and all the places he went, I think there's probably, if we knew all of it, there's a lot we could probably learn from that today, But I think
Yeah.
it's at least ancient Egypt was included in the story in some way there, and it's not kind of
Yeah.
just ripping off the tails. At
Yeah.
least Jesus actually connected with the place.
He was. And if we look back at the sources in the Bible, basically if God tells Jesus, go to Egypt, it is safe.
Mm.
He tells him to go to Egypt. So he goes to Egypt with Mary and Joseph, and they live there for 7 years. And that's where Jesus goes to school and learns a lot of his thinking.
Yes, ancient wisdom, no doubt.
Ancient wisdom. So, and this is not just me sprouting off woo-woo stuff. This is in the Bible.
Yeah. It's esoteric knowledge, which is accepted.
And this is something that a lot of people don't acknowledge.
Yes.
That yes, he did go there and he lived there for a while. One of my favorite paintings is actually of a sphinx with Mary and Jesus sleeping in the paws of the sphinx. It's a beautiful painting.
That sounds beautiful.
Yeah,
like that.
And
is safe.
you've got Joseph. You've got Joseph on the side, burning, making a fire, and it's just like it's a magical picture.
Yes, send that on to me, actually, please. I'd love to see.
I will. It's one of my favorites. Yeah, but also, as you said, the influence on Egypt. I was speaking with Bethany Hughes the other day about Aphrodite and Venus. Now we know the Romans took on a lot of the ancient Greek gods and gave them new names. So Aphrodite became Venus. But Aphrodite has her links in the Middle East from Ishtar and Inanna. And the stories of Ishtar and Inanna have their roots in Isis.
Yes.
And when you hear the stories of these goddesses, they are so similar.
Yes.
They got pregnant spiritually. They had husbands who died, and the husbands were brought back to life. And they were brought back to life by magic.
Yes.
Isis is told she brought back Osiris's body with magic. Yeah. The same happened with Aphrodite. When her husband died, she cried so much that all the passion and energy that she put out there brought him back to life.
Yes.
Yeah.
God, it's fascinating, isn't it? I'd say the parallels, with ancient Egyptian culture all over the world from all different time periods are probably endless.
Yeah. Yeah. We could go on like this for hours and make lists of things.
I feel like we could, I mean, there's about 12 of them have just occurred to me. There are 12 different kinds of episodes we could just...
I'm here.
Oh, Jesus. It's been absolutely brilliant, Curtis. I have so enjoyed this chat. Every bit as entertaining and informative as I just knew it was going to be. I've learned so much. It's just fascinating comparing and contrasting, my own culture, because, we go back quite a ways as well, but there's so much of it that we're still only discovering, and how exciting it is to still just be discovering things that are so very, very old. And it's nice to chat to somebody from somewhere else who has a similar kind of experience. You know, they're still constantly, as you say, your friend has just found that temple. Did you say it was a temple or a grave that she found?
The tomb, yeah.
Tomb. It's you know, it's yeah, it was a fascinating chat. Thank you so much for your time this evening, Curtis.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me.
Dave has a pet peeve for people doing Irish accents, so you know, he's probably gonna go and watch The Mummy again to get back at you, I'd say.
As long as it's not the one with Tom Cruise, it's fine.
Curtis, thank you so much. Hit subscribe for more fun and witchy adventures. I upload every Thursday and usually on a Monday or a Tuesday as well. You're not going to want to miss it. Slán agus beannacht. Goodbye and good luck to you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Curtis, thank you so much. And love to Filippo too.
I will.